Remember to turn on all notifications so you don't miss a video. The Shonen Female Defense Force is back again with another case. I will be responding to Is My Hero Academia Sexist? Yes, by Lady Inea. This is a long one. Her two main points are the sexist objectification, which is distasteful and distracting, and the constant sidelining of them. She talks about a whole lot of irrelevant stuff in the introduction, so I'm skipping that. Let the prosecution begin. In part 1, she brings up the male gaze, which she defines as women in art are portrayed as sexual objects for the pleasure of a presumptive heterosexual male audience. She says, quote, the women in MHA exist as sexual objects first and characters of their own second, end quote. She says, quote, if the goal of presenting a female character a certain way is to simply make a presumed straight male viewer go, that's hot, then female characters are treated as sexual objects first and characters second, end quote. She then brings up panty shots, boob shots, and groping. That's a lot of info, so let me rebuttal. So she clearly laid out her criteria for determining if a character is treated as an object first. First, I'll focus on female characters. Then I'll compare the males to females. Alright, so how would we know if the goal of presenting a character is simply fan service? It sounds like she's saying if fan service is the priority, then it's objectification. But the mere existence of fan service doesn't mean fan service is the priority. So if her problem is the priority, again, how can she determine whether fan service is the priority or just another factor in the scene? For example, during this speech, she shows Momo covering herself up with a blanket. The scene has fan service, but it also shows off Momo's powers. How would Lady prove that the priority was not showing off the powers and was instead the fan service? For the hot spring scene, I would agree that the priority was fan service, but my point is that you can't always make a clear distinction on what factor of the scene is the priority. She could also be saying, if the scene has fan service at all, it's objectification, but that would be much worse because she would be arguing that fan service and characterization can't coexist, which is false. A character can have a full personality and still have panty shots. As a matter of fact, the males are sexualized too, which would make Hero Academia sexist against the males too, which doesn't make sense. That's a nice segue into male characters. What about scenes where the priority is to make the female audience go, that's hot, when presenting a male character? Is the female gaze also going to be a problem in this video? I doubt it. Then she talks about fan service. She fairly points out male fan service like Fairy Tail, but she says something off. Quote, a male character's chest is never going to be the defining trait of his character. It's never going to be something other characters comment on all the time. It's never going to be what new characters react to first. It's never going to be that important. End quote. If we're talking about physical characteristics, this is completely false. Look at Fist of the North Star, Dragon Ball Z, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I will agree that muscles are rarely pointed out, probably because the stories are for a male audience, but they can definitely be the defining physical trait, like in the trio I mentioned, thus making it important. Nearly every male character in JoJo's from part 1 to part 4 were drawn as ripped statues. Nearly every male fighter in DBZ has visible muscles. I haven't seen Fist of the North Star, but a lot of the major male characters are jacked men, and I believe Kenshiro often takes off his shirt. She talks about how Fairy Tail has fan service for both men and women, but women like Lucy have more focus on their body parts, like camera angles, because of the male gaze. I completely agree. If you have a male audience, it makes more sense why you would sexualize the females more. However, this does not mean the men are not sexualized in Fairy Tail. Women are just slightly sexualized more. Also, it's easier to sexualize a female character compared to a male character. Also, we could just be both missing the sexualization of male characters because it's not as obvious. If the camera zooms in on a man flexing during an attack, that doesn't register in my mind as sexualization because I'm not looking for it. Here's a perfect example. When Deku uses One For All for the first time in the anime, there is a close-up shot of his legs being shown through his clothes before he jumps. Then when he punches, his sleeves conveniently rip off and you can see his muscular arm. At the end, he's literally flexing and you can see his arm in its entirety. That never registered as sexualization to me until I started defending women. There could be dozens of scenes like this that go past my radar and the radars of many others, so I can't safely say that men don't have more focus on their bodies in these stories. She goes on to say that bodies aren't inherently sexual and that it's all about how they're presented, like clothes or commenting on it. I agree. At the end of her explanation, she says, quote, that you've sexualized and objectified a character, end quote. I don't know if she's making this mistake, but I should point out that sexualization and objectification are not the same thing. Sexualization is to make something sexual. Objectification is the action of degrading someone to the status of a mere object. Just because attention is called to a character's sexual body parts does not mean that they have suddenly been reduced to an object. If that's what Lady is arguing, then she would basically be arguing that all sexualization is bad, which is ridiculous. To think that the minute a character is sexualized, they completely lose their status as a character and are demoted to an object is stupid. A character can be sexualized and still be a character. If a character has a personality, goals, backstory, and a character arc, they're not an object, regardless of whether a scene sexualizes them or not. If you do consider them an object at that point, then the question would be, what's the difference between a character and an object? And if your answer is whether they've been sexualized or not, you'd be delusional because a human being isn't an object. You could then argue that any real person who sexualized themselves is an object, because objectification exists in real life. Quote, if a series shows us a part of a woman's body before we see her face or she gets to speak, even if that show goes on to develop that female character, we still start off our perception of her by pure objectification, end quote. This is a questionable take. In real life, we usually see someone before we hear them speak. This is reflected in stories. If Lady's argument is that if a character is sexualized before they speak or show their face, then it's objectification, then are we keeping track of when this happens to men as well? I don't even agree with the premise. Firstly, wouldn't that mean all characters are objects before they speak? Objectification is the action of degrading someone to the status of a mere object. If a character appears and has no characterization yet, aren't they just an object by these standards? Or maybe the word degrading is important. Does that mean a character has to be a character before they can be degraded? That would mean that her 3 examples don't work, since they weren't characters yet. Let me give her some leeway. Let's say that objectification is when a characterless character is sexualized. But if the character is spoken about before the sexual shots, then they are no longer characterless. Hold up, wait a minute. I actually had some degree of respect for Lady before this point because she's had the most competent arguments so far of shonen female haters. But then I did a little bit of research. The 3 characters she's showing in this objectification section are Shizuku, Mikuru, and Satsuki. I went to find Shizuku's first appearance and it's in episode 1. We see her from the side handing out a paper, but her face isn't visible. She has dialogue as well. But Lady just implied that Shizuku's first appearance had sexual shots before showing her face or her speaking. She lied. You can easily just go on the wiki, then the character, then first appearance. In the manga, we can actually see her face. Now I need to fact check the other 2 examples. For Mikuru, she appears in episode 1 of Haruhi. She's first brought up when Haruhi says she knows someone made for the club. And then there's the first scene of Mikuru. As you can see, she's not being sexualized yet, and we've seen her face. If you count her whimpering as speaking, she already spoke. If you don't, then she says, "What is this? Where are we? Why did you bring me here?" It's only a whole minute and a half later that her boobs are double clutched. Bro, what are we doing? I created an additional rule, but even without it, so far, Lady is 0 for 2. Her examples aren't even meeting her own criteria. Now I haven't seen Kuroko, but I know how to do research. Satsuki's first appearance is in episode 13. You want to take a guess on whether she lied about this too? Guess. I'll wait. She lied. You want to know what we see first? That's right, her voice. She says, "I thought you'd be here," to Aomine. We physically see her. It's from the back, but there's no sexualization. Then we see her face. No sexualization in this scene. So she picked 3 examples and got all of them wrong. It's not that hard to go on the wiki, find a character's first appearance, and rewatch the episode. I don't even know if this metric holds weight anymore, because the 3 handpicked examples didn't line up with their rules. But just to throw salt in the wound, you know whose sexual body parts are focused on before they speak or show their face? All Might. So far, Lady has proved that Hero Academia really is sexist. Against men. I'm 8 minutes into a 40-minute video. When talking about Mount Lady, she proves that she basically hates all fan service, because despite this fan service tying back to Mount Lady's character and world building, which is the most clever and efficient way to do fan service, Lady Inea still says, quote, "I do hate this a lot. It's kind of terrible, which is my default position on most fan service," end quote. She might as well have just said, "I hate fan service," and kept this video under a minute. Quote, "For Bubble Girl and the heroes to follow, most of this objectification stems from their costumes. They are revealing in a way that serves not their powers, but the male gaze," end quote. I can make this same argument about the male characters. None of them need skin-tight suits for their powers, but they're still wearing them. She says a common counter-argument to fan service is that it serves the story or plot and is therefore excusable or expected, end quote. I can tell you right now, that's not my argument. Fan service is just there. It doesn't positively or negatively affect the story. Just like a cool character design, it's not needed nor does it bring down the story, but it's greatly appreciated. In fact, I could easily argue sex sells and that this makes the story more marketable, thus serving the story in an external way. So as I've laid out, fan service doesn't need to serve the story to be allowed, but it also does positively affect the marketability of the story. She complains about the sexualization of Bubble Girl for a few minutes, but I just don't care. I actually agree with most of her points, but I just don't see them as problems. Her outfit being revealing has nothing to do with her powers, but I ain't complaining. Doesn't bring down the story. Quote, She has this costume because it looks cool and sexy, I guess, and it makes the scene extra titillating for a male viewer. What's the point? End quote. Bro, you just said the point. She argues that this objectifies and belittles her. The tickling? Yeah, but the costume? No. I can't even use her definition of objectification anymore since she couldn't provide examples that fit the bill. But even if we use my definition, it still wouldn't line up. She already had a character at that point. Her first appearance is her speaking from a distance in 124. We can barely see her, so she's not being sexualized. Her dialogue provides some personality. If you want to cheat and discount that, then she appears again in 126 and she's talking again before appearing. Characterization before sexualization. I should make that a hashtag. You could also argue that the belittling was to show Night Eye's strictness. Then she makes some more arguments that I already countered. Do you guys think any of these feminists would go to bat for male characters using the same arguments? I don't think so. And you know what I call that? Sexist. When talking about Midnight, she says, quote, there's an in-story reason for her to have a sex goddess getup, end quote, and then explains her quirk. But shortly after, she says, quote, every aspect of this getup is done in a way to objectify her, not to develop her character, explore how sex appeal works in hero society, etc., end quote. Didn't she just get done explaining the connection her suit has to her powers? Doesn't that develop the setting, since powers fall under setting? Doesn't that mean that there are aspects of the suit that aren't done in a way to objectify her? Why did she immediately forget about that? I don't even care about her sexism argument because it's not mine. This Momo section is going to be my stopping point because this video is getting too long for me. She starts by criticizing the logic of the outfit. An anime with illogical outfits? Impossible. Here's my counter. Momo's outfit successfully reveals her skin for her quirk. Horikoshi chose to style it in a unique way that doesn't make complete sense in real life, but it still serves its purpose to the quirk, which was your box to check for decent fan service, therefore making this not a problem. If the man wanted to show side boobs, let him show side boobs. She's making issues out of things that aren't issues and changing the rules. Are we gonna start criticizing capes too, like Incredibles? Then she sums up her section by saying, fan service doesn't serve the plot, despite giving clear examples of the contrary in Mount Lady, Midnight, and Momo. So far, only Bubble Girl had fan service that didn't double as development. That's 22 minutes. In conclusion, the first half of this video was rough. She created rules for fanservice and objectification that were unclear. She dismissed male fanservice to a degree by skimming over times where men's muscles are the focus of a shot. She created another flawed system for objectification in character introductions and lied about her examples, showed that she just hates fanservice in general, and kept contradicting herself towards the end. The defense does not rest because I still have to soldier through the second half of this video. The Response Reaper will be back. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and help me revolutionize the manga industry by buying my manga and spreading the word. All important links will be in the description.